U.S. President Donald Trump held a phone call with the Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday as Washington pushes for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Earlier, the Kremlin spokesperson said that talks will be about settling the Ukraine conflict and normalizing relations between Russia and the United States. Trump has already said that there are things on the table that perhaps weren't in the past, including the exchange of territory and access for Russia to certain resources in Ukraine. Last week, President Putin pushed back on a U.S. brokered plan for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine with a series of sweeping conditions. Since Trump's return to the White House in January, his new administration, they have sought to bring an end to Russia's war by berating and pressuring Kiev. Now, Trump, in fact, has repeatedly said that Ukraine President Zelensky does not have the cards to come out on top in negotiations. Meanwhile, Moscow has been offering normalization and hinting at territorial gains and sanctions relief. Now, Russia's Special Envoy on International Economic and Investment Cooperation, Kirill Dmitriev, he said that Russia sees big prospects to work with the United States, including in the space sector.
It is also very important that we see many opportunities for cooperation in the investment and economics. I have already mentioned that American companies have lost over $300 billion by leaving the Russian market. Many of them want to return to the Russian market, but of course it will be difficult to do so. Many areas are taken by our companies, and so of course some American companies will come back. But we see great prospects in creating joint ventures with Russian companies. We believe that many of the American companies that will be returning will only be able to return by creating joint ventures with Russian companies, with those companies that have already shown their success.
My colleague Amrit Pal Singh is following this story. He joins us now. Amrit, Putin had raised some questions earlier about the ceasefire. Most of them were regarding, who's going to enforce the ceasefire, how will it be enforced on over 2,000 kilometers. What developments have you tracked since then?
Putin's conditions were very clear that one, what you mentioned about who will monitor the ceasefire, whether it's effective, because he does not want any, either NATO or European and even American, any Western troops on ground in Ukraine. He does not want them at their doorstep. So he was very clear about that, be it whether about the coalition of the willing, which are France, Britain and Australia also had hinted. He is not amenable to that. He does not want any military, foreign military presence apart from the Ukrainian military in Ukraine, because he sees that as an affront to his security or the security of his country. Secondly, he's made it very clear that whatever territories he controls after the March 22 the gains that Russia made in Luhansk, in Donetsk, in Zaporozhye, in Kherson. So he is not amenable to giving that away. Crimea he considers a part of the Russian territory. Ukraine also has some conditions about returning of soldiers and ensuring security guarantees, etc. But I think Zelensky realizes that he's not in a position to negotiate, and therefore he's agreed to the 30-day ceasefire. Now, during this phone call, President Putin would have made his conditions very, very clear to the American president that if they are met, he is willing at some give and take to begin negotiations on the 30-day ceasefire mark.
Indeed, the rare earths deal also seems something that Russia is keen on. They want to also expand cooperation in space. One would presume that sanctions would need lifting first, isn't it?
Oh, that's right. Another very important condition of his is to release all the frozen assets, to ease the sanctions against Russia, which both Europe and the Western countries, including the United States of America, have imposed. He wants them to go away. Donald Trump is amenable to that. He's hinted that easing the sanctions is on the table. Now, cooperation in space and in terms of resources is something which, again, are peripheral demands which can be met the core of his demand is. I think
Yes.
he wants to control the territories.
Amrit, we don't seem to have much time, so very quickly also about Zelensky. He's currently in Finland. He's expected to meet defense industry representatives. What signal does this send?
Baltic states are keen on supporting Ukraine, but how far they'll be able to commit remains to be seen. I was today at the Raisina dialogue in Delhi, and I spoke with the Latvian foreign minister, and she was very critical of the Russian demands. The Baltic states, especially, and many European powers believe that there needs to be, for a permanent peace, there needs to be a kind of defense enforcement of the Ukrainian forces.
Right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Amritpal Singh, and he's continuing to track that story for us.